Right now on Upfront.
The new fight.
They had an atrocious night, not just nationwide, but here in Wisconsin.
The new legislature coming into focus in Madison, Democrats gaining seats in the Assembly and Senate.
We were at 11 people last time I was at this podium, and now we are at 15. That is a huge win.
Billions sitting in a state surplus, a budget year approaching, and endless possibilities for new legislation.
Are voters saying they want you to work with Democrats more?
Our guest this Sunday, Republican Assembly Speaker Robin Vos, exclusively with us. The interview you won't want to miss.
Then the intensifying race. How big of a fight is this going to be?
I don't know.
The battle to lead the Democratic National Committee. Democrats reeling from major losses. Now Ben Wickler, chairman of the state Democratic Party, seriously considering a bid.
You have to ask, what more could you have done? What decisions could you have made differently? And most importantly, what do you do next?
Democratic strategist Jennifer Holdsworth, who's managed a DNC chair race, bringing us exclusively inside the growing Democratic battle.
And the push for bipartisanship in Washington. The group No Labels with its nationwide meeting in just days. First, its chief strategist is with us. The new efforts in Wisconsin's role just moments away.
This is Upfront with Jaron Jordan and political director Matt Smith.
Hi, everyone. Thanks for joining us. A big shakeup in Madison, and lawmakers are ready for the session ahead. Democrats picking up 10 seats in the state assembly, shrinking the Republican majority to 54 to 45. In the state Senate, Republicans now hold an 18 to 15 majority.
A new analysis by John Johnson at Marquette shows statewide assembly Republicans did better than Donald Trump on the ballot. In fact, in 5 assembly districts, Republican candidates won where Trump lost. And now the attention turns to the new legislative session. With that, we bring in Assembly Speaker Robin Vos, the longest-serving speaker in Wisconsin history, back at his post.
Good morning.
Speaker, good to see you.
Yeah, nice to see you guys.
Welcome back to the show. I'm curious with these new margins that we've seen with the new maps in place. Do you think this is the last cycle Republicans will control the Assembly and Senate?
Oh, absolutely not.
No.
I am very confident the Assembly will stay Republican for the rest of the decade, even though we now have suffered through the Evers gerrymander. If you look at the 11 districts, which are the most competitive under the new maps that we just adopted, 6 of those are controlled by Democrats, 5 are controlled by Republicans. Okay, so kind of what Governor Evers wanted, which was not legislative districts, but kind of one statewide map. They wanted to closely follow the statewide results. The good news for us is that unless we lose all 5 of those competitive districts, we're still in charge for the rest of the decade. So I think the Democrats are going to have to get used to the idea that even though they outspent us 2-1, they were not successful because we have a better ground game, better candidates, ultimately a better message, and I think that's going to resonate for the rest of the decade.
This past week, the Department of Revenue projected the state surplus is now roughly at $4 billion, not including the $1.9 billion in the rainy day fund.
Well, haven't Republicans done a great job?
Republicans want to focus on tax cuts.
Yeah.
So what does that mean in terms of what we're going to see in terms of any legislation, how quickly we could see legislation and any tax cuts in this upcoming session?
Well, if you remember in the last budget, which of course for all of us seems like a generation ago, but it was only a year and a half, when Wisconsin enacted that budget, we had the largest increase in education spending in literally a generation since 2004, 2005. So we did our job to make sure that we had enough for schools, for health care. We had a large increase for nursing homes, all kinds of good investments in our top priorities. But we also had a large tax cut that was in there, a large income tax cut. Governor Evers signed a very small part of it, but 95% of that income tax cut was vetoed, and that's why we have this huge surplus. Now, we're not going to spend that money on growing the size of government because we already gave pretty large increases to make sure we kept up with inflation in the last budget. So that is our top priority, to make sure that going backwards, that money gets returned to the taxpayers.
And have you talked to the governor about any of these plans yet?
No, I mean, we're still organizing ourselves. So Assembly Republicans, we're going to do a retreat in December, kind of make sure we have all the new members who've joined our caucus have an opportunity to have that conversation. But my top priority is going to be a retirement income. So I'd love for us to be income tax free for seniors. It's relatively easy to do. I think under the bill that we passed that Governor Evers vetoed, the first $75,000 of income for an individual will be exempt. So we're not talking about millionaires and billionaires. It's average middle income people who have 2 retirements, right?
So are you going to send the same tax bill, or are you going to change the language?
Well, we have to talk about it with our members. We have new members. I mean, I think the language that we had was pretty good. It was very progressive. You know, the fact that it wasn't open-ended, it was capped. I think that was something that we certainly would look at. But again, I want to talk about with my colleagues. We have a new state Senate. We have a lot of people to talk about.
And you think the governor will change his mind?
I sure hope so. I mean, I don't know why he wouldn't. We have this big surplus. We just had a huge investment in education. We saw referenda around the state where the people of Wisconsin, as we've said, they have the right to raise their own taxes. We're not going to do it. So I think it's a perfect opportunity for us to say, let's put the money back in the hands of people who need it for themselves.
The billions in referendum, doesn't that show, though, that education needs more money from the
Absolutely
state?
not. It's the opposite. There are some parts of Wisconsin where people want to spend more money, and they have every right to do that. If they want to raise their taxes at the ballot box, I support that idea. The idea that we're going to do it for them and take the burden on for every single district if it was the same, that's just wrong for the state.
The governor, in his statement, talking about the surplus, looked to the next state budget, as I'm sure you saw. WisPolitics, our editorial partner, reports agencies requesting $2.1 billion in additional general purpose revenue in the first year of the new budget, $1.3 billion in the second. Revenues obviously going up as well. In your mind, from what you have seen so far, what is dead on arrival?
We're not going to give $1 billion to the university. I can tell you that's probably not going to happen. I think it's unlikely that we're going to give Superintendent Underly's request for this massive increase in education spending when we just gave the largest increase in a generation like 18 months ago. So that is nothing but a political document from her. I think we need to look and say, how are we going to keep Wisconsin competitive? In my mind, that's by making sure we have people who are working for the state of Wisconsin. We still have far too many employees that are working from home. We had that audit that came out over the summer. I think it was some employees hadn't been in the office in months and months.
State employees you're
State
talking
employees,
about?
yeah, state employees. That's really an embarrassment. So number one, we need to make sure people are actually doing their job.
You want to force them back into the office?
I would love to be able to say people have to be back in the office at least 3 or 4 days a week. I mean, we saw Amazon, which was 3 days a week, just announced by January 1st, 100% of people are going to be back in the office. I think we need to look at how state government functions, and one of the reasons that we have not had the services we want to deliver is because a lot of employees aren't working, or they're working only from home and not doing it very well with little supervision. So I would love for us to be able to say, hey, if we're going to be giving more money to agencies, we need to make sure we're actually performing.
Let's talk about Trump.
Sure.
You voted for him?
I did.
Walk me through this transformation. You've had an interesting relationship with him.
Yeah.
He backed recall efforts for you. You previously said before the primary it'd be a suicide mission to nominate him. How do you then go out and campaign for him?
Well, every choice is binary, right? I mean, so there were really only two choices. There was never a world where I was going to vote for Kamala Harris or Joe Biden at the time. And when I sat down and looked at it, I thought about it, the future of our country, the future of our state, and there's no doubt in my mind that Donald Trump being the president is a better option than either Kamala Harris or Joe Biden. So it was a pretty easy answer. My wife and I actually were the ones who headed up the Trump campaign in our chunk of the world. We put out most of the Trump signs. We did most of the lit drops.
Did you feel that politically necessary to keep your political career
I
intact?
mean, I'm not going to be here forever. I kind of, every election cycle, I try to vote for the person that I think is best for the country. I think in the primaries, I voted for Ron DeSantis because I thought he would have an easier time winning. I was wrong. I mean, Donald Trump had a clear path to victory. People rallied around him. I have never seen the level of intensity of support for a presidential candidate in my adult life. So obviously, he brings something out in people that really inspired them to vote. We got to respect that.
You're not going to be around forever. Are you going to run in 26 again?
That's my plan. I mean, we'll have to see what happens. It's far too early. I mean, I just won. I mean, holy cow. I mean, I went through
Never too early.
2024 was a pretty hard year for Robin Vos. 2 recalls, a primary, an independent whack job running against me in the fall. I mean, it was not an easy time, but hopefully most of that is behind me, and now we can focus on all the good things that are left.
This past week, the Office of Lawyer Regulation issued a 10-count ethics complaint against Michael Gableman, tied to his review of the 2020 election, which you initially hired him for to look into the 2020 election. That review, or the ethics complaint, accused him of lying, violating laws, despairing a judge as well. How should the Supreme Court move in this case?
Well, I hope they disbar Michael Gableman so he's never allowed to practice law in Wisconsin again. I tried to find the person that I thought was best qualified. If you can't trust a former Supreme Court justice to follow the law and do the right thing, I don't really know how much different we could have done. Mike Gableman went off the rails. He began to look for accolades outside of the client relationship that we had. He ultimately paid the price when I fired him. And now I didn't bring charges, but as I look at what the Office of Lawyer Regulation is saying happened, it's an embarrassment for anybody who practices law. So I certainly hope Michael Gableman loses his law license. I hope he goes back to work at Home Depot, where he was working prior to working for us.
Never again? That's an egregious punishment.
Yeah, I hope that's what they do. I mean, when somebody lies to the court, when somebody breaks attorney-client privilege, when somebody goes on their own fishing expedition, kind of basically holding the client hostage, that's not right. It's not the way it should be. So if we don't hold people accountable for the decisions that they make, I have that every 2 years where I have to go back to the voters and people say yes or no. I have it in the assembly where my colleagues hopefully vote yes or no for me to be speaker. The only thing that lawyers have is their license to practice law. And if you break that in such an egregious way, you got to pay the ultimate price.
The court also heard arguments this past week on the case involving Megan Wolf, the state's elections chief. Is there any scenario in your mind the Assembly would move to impeach her this session?
I think it's not likely. I mean, I really want 2020 to be in the rearview mirror. Look, the voters of Wisconsin did a great thing by enacting a new constitutional amendment which says that we want to make sure only citizens can vote. I want to focus in the spring session on how are we going to put that into law. We have to actually pass statutes that will say, how do we ensure when someone shows up to same-day register that we know they're a citizen? How do we make sure that when somebody has a driver's license, it's very clear that they can't use that to vote? Those are both open questions right now. So I think those are the things I would rather focus on. I want to do the Monday count bill. We passed that in the Assembly. It died in the Senate. I think that for an awful lot of folks who believe there's some kind of a midnight dump, I would much rather have that occur in the light of day on Monday where everybody knows they have the chance to watch it. We can broadcast it on the internet, right? There's a lot of things we could do, but we have to get that bill done. So I want to focus on those things, not look at the past.
Eric Hovde, before he conceded this past week, again pushed this notion of ballot dumps in the city of Milwaukee. What did you make of that before he conceded?
Look, I think he's got some legitimate points. Look, I mean, first of all, we know the Democrats funded this this independent candidate, this America First candidate. They're the ones who helped to get him on the ballot. They're the ones who helped to pay for his campaign.
He says he's a conservative and backs Trump.
Well, just because you're a dupe doesn't mean that the Democrats didn't use you as a stooge for exactly what they wanted, which is to help elect liberal Tammy Baldwin. So Eric Hovde has every right to be angry about that. He also has every right to look and say there were shenanigans also in this election. Now, I don't think they were anywhere near the same, but how did we know that people were United States citizens when they voted? We had no idea. How do people, when they register on the same day, how do we know that they actually are a citizen of America? We don't know that.
I want to ask you about Milwaukee Public Schools. They have yet to reinstate school resource officers, which was a stipulation in the bipartisan shared revenue law. It's supposed to be in place as of January of this past year. Are you going to take any action in response to that, or can you take any action?
I'm going to look at it. I mean, my answer would be very simple. If you cannot put school resource officers back in there under the law, an awful lot of things that we do for MPS have to be on the chopping block. I mean, they get higher state aid than most places around the state of Wisconsin. I don't know if that should continue, right, if they can't follow the law.
You're threatening potential future funding at this point.
I think it's possible. I mean, if people can't, and the same with the university. When something is in the books, when you've cut a deal, you have to keep the deal in order to move forward and be able to see the largesse that was given in that last deal. So we gave a pretty big increase in education spending, as I said, the biggest in a generation. If that's not good enough for MPS to be able to say, I want to keep kids safe, I think all of us have to ask if MPS, as it's currently constructed, even works. Maybe it has to be broken apart. Maybe we have to have somebody take it over. Maybe we have to do something dramatically different because what they're doing now certainly doesn't seem to be working.
No shortage of issues ahead of the new session. Assembly Speaker Robin Vos, like always, thank you so much.
Up next, the intensifying battle for Democrats, the race to be the new chair of the Democratic National Committee. A Democratic strategist who's run a DNC chair race is taking us inside as Wisconsin's chairman, Ben Wickler, seriously considers a bid.